When I opened my eyes, I was weak, dizzy, but happy. The first thing I whispered was his name. Daniel! I smiled despite the pain, remembering how he cried when the doctors told him he might die without a kidney. I didn't hesitate. I volunteered before he could ask. I loved him, and he swore he loved me too. We had talked about rings and forever, even picked baby names. But that morning, as I reached for my phone, I realized something was off. No flowers. No Daniel. Just a cool nurse with kind eyes who said, "He left early. He seemed in a rush. Tuxedo and all." Tuxedo? Confused, I blinked at the ceiling. Why would Daniel wear a tux the day after major surgery? I thought maybe he was planning a surprise for me. But as I unlocked my phone and saw the first message, my heart stopped mid-beat. I couldn't breathe. Not from the surgery. Not from painkillers, but from disbelief. The screen filled with tagged photos and texts from friends. Daniel, in a sleek tuxedo, smiling, standing beside a woman in a lace wedding gown. "Congrats, Daniel and Trisha," read the caption. My hand trembled. Trisha, his ex-girlfriend. The one he said was history. The one he promised never even crossed his mind anymore. My throat went dry. Was this a joke? A dream? I clicked on video clips. He kissed her on the steps of a chapel, threw rice in the air, laughed like I'd never seen him laugh before. While I was here, stapled, stitched, missing a kidney he didn't deserve. I tried to sit up, but my body screamed. He was supposed to hold my hand today, not hers. The nurse came in and noticed my state. She assumed I was reacting to the anesthesia. I almost laughed. She hadn't seen the betrayal bleeding through my screen. I turned my face to the wall, tears soaking the hospital pillow. I remembered how he'd cried when the surgeon told him he'd need a donor, how he held my face in his hands and said, "Marry me after this." I'd smiled like a fool, thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. He let me dream, let me open my body for him. And now he was someone else's husband. The air felt heavier with each second, but my thoughts were louder than the machines around me. I gave him a piece of me, literally, and all I got in return was silence. By evening, I forced myself to sit up, needing answers. I dialed his number, and it went to voicemail, over and over. At midnight, I sent him a message. "Where are you?" But I didn't need a reply. His Instagram story showed them dancing, holding champagne glasses, surrounded by candlelight and gold. I watched him twirl her in the same motion he once used with me. My heart broke again, in a quieter, more dangerous way. A nurse came in with soup. I asked for a different room. Not for peace, but because I didn't want to see the door every time it didn't open for him. I couldn't let myself hope anymore. He wasn't coming. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized he never truly had. The next morning, someone did show up. His mother. I thought she came to explain, to beg forgiveness on his behalf, maybe bring flowers. But instead, she sat down calmly and said, "It was always going to be Trisha. You were just the helper." My lips parted in disbelief. She looked at me like I was a temp worker who'd outstayed her usefulness. "You did a good thing. Don't ruin it with drama." That's when I realized this wasn't just Daniel's betrayal. It was an entire orchestra playing together behind my back. His mother never liked me. Trisha was the rich one, the chosen one. I was just the kidney donor who took things too seriously. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stared at her until she left. The pain shifted, no longer medical. It was spiritual. Alone again, I stared at the foredrip, wondering how many months it would take to recover. Not just my body, but whatever soul was left in me. I had given everything, every ounce of trust, every heartbeat, every future plan. I looked at my reflection in the black TV screen and didn't recognize the woman lying in bed. She looked defeated, hollowed out, like a shell of the girl who once believed in love. That girl had died the day Daniel said, "I do," to someone else. But something else flickered behind my eyes. Something small, hot, and quiet. Anger. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay the same. And I wouldn't stay broken. Not for him. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone when I left the hospital. I didn't even ask for a wheelchair. I checked myself out. Body still sore, scars fresh, emotions raw. I walked out on my own, every step a reminder that pain was now my companion. A friend picked me up. Sophia, my only real friend, who once warned me about Daniel. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just helped me into her car and said, "You're not done. This isn't where your story ends." I said nothing, but her words rooted somewhere deep. We didn't go to my apartment. I'd given it up while I was sick. She let me stay with her, and for the first week, I barely spoke. But by the second week, I was watching business podcasts in the dark, plotting quietly. Sophia ran an online marketing agency. She didn't pressure me, but I asked questions, stayed up late listening to her client calls, reading her strategy notes. I was still healing, but something inside me had switched. I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to build. I started offering small design work to her clients, then editing copy. Within 3 months, I had my own mini brand online. No one knew it was me. I used a pseudonym. That anonymity gave me power. I wasn't his ex. I wasn't a heartbreak story. I was reborn. Each night, I sketched out goals. One of them, find a way to rise so high that the people who buried me would be forced to look up in awe or fear. I hadn't decided yet. By month 6, I was renting a small studio and had a growing list of loyal clients. I smiled more. I didn't cry when I looked in mirrors. But every now and then, when I lay in bed, I touched the scar on my side and remembered why I was here. I checked Daniel's social media sometimes, not because I missed him, but because I needed to see the cracks forming. His company wasn't doing well. There were vague posts about restructuring and setbacks. His wife had gone silent online. Rumors swirled in comment sections, but I never engaged. I just watched, waited, planned. I knew I wasn't ready yet, but soon, very soon, I'd step into the light, and they wouldn't see me coming. Sophia eventually noticed my late nights and obsession with Daniel's downfall. She wasn't worried. She was intrigued. "You're not just trying to get even," she said one evening as we shared tea. "You're becoming someone he can't touch anymore." Her words stirred something in me. I didn't want to just be stronger than him. I wanted to be unforgettable. So I sharpened my skills further, took classes, attended networking events under my new alias. In every conversation, I listened carefully because I had a target now. I found out Daniel's startup was hemorrhaging money. One of his former clients, a frustrated investor, had ranted online. That's when I saw it. A weak link. Daniel had built his empire using charm and stolen ideas, including some I'd once shared with him in love. Now I could offer a cleaner, better version of his services. The irony? People would pay me to fix what he broke. I launched a competing service under a sleek new brand. I didn't advertise directly. but I made sure my offering showed up exactly where Daniel's failed. Word spread quickly, especially when clients began posting reviews about how fresh, smart, and well-managed my work was. Daniel's brand began to lose traction, slowly, subtly. I didn't dance on his grave. I just pulled the ground out from under him 1 inch at a time. He probably didn't even know it was me behind the competitor until month 8, when I landed a partnership he'd been chasing for a year. The client tagged me publicly, calling me the future of digital strategy. That night, I got a DM from him. One word. You? I didn't reply. I left him in suspense, the same way he left me in that hospital bed. The next message came 3 days later. A full paragraph. He said he was surprised, then proud. Proud, as if I were some student he'd mentored. He still had the arrogance to take credit for the woman I'd become. I almost laughed. Instead, I screenshotted it and filed it under delusion. Sophia and I toasted that night, not because I was winning, but because I finally felt nothing when he spoke. That was the real victory. But something still gnawed at me, the way he got to walk around thinking he'd done no real harm. I hadn't decided what to do about that yet. But the day he made a post blaming his company's losses on internal disloyalty, something inside me clicked. I wasn't finished. Not until he felt what it was like to lose something irreplaceable, without even knowing it was gone until too late. A new opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. One of Daniel's top investors reached out to me through a referral. He'd been growing uneasy about Daniel's choices and wanted a second opinion. I took the meeting in person, dressed in sharp black, hair slicked back, voice steady. The man was older, shrewd, and took notes as I laid out a full report on Daniel's business inefficiencies, data I'd gathered from public sources and industry chatter. He asked for a proposal. I gave him one with a smile. A week later, he pulled out of Daniel's startup and put half his capital into mine. Just like that, I'd stripped Daniel of his oxygen. I didn't gloat. I just watched as the panic set in across his team's LinkedIn pages. People were jumping ship. He posted a vague, restructuring announcement. I poured myself tea and waited for what came next. The phone call I received wasn't from Daniel. It was from Trisha. Her voice was brittle, like glass about to crack. "I know it was you," she whispered. "He won't say it, but I know." I stayed silent. She continued, "You want revenge? Fine. But you got it. We're drowning. You can stop now." Her voice trembled, so different from the smug girl in the wedding photos. "He's not the man I married." She added more to herself than me. That made me pause. "Not the man you married?" I almost told her the truth, that he never was. But instead, I said, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just succeeding." I hung up before she could reply. That's when I realized they weren't just losing money. They were losing each other. And all I had to do was stay silent and keep building. Sophia said I should feel satisfied. I was richer, freer, more respected than ever before. But a part of me still hadn't healed. Not the scar, not the betrayal, but the memory of how alone I felt when I needed someone the most. I didn't want Daniel's company anymore. I didn't want to destroy him entirely. I just wanted him to look in the mirror one day and see what I saw, an empty man who cost himself everything. I decided to visit the hospital again, just to walk those halls as the woman I was now. The nurse who had cared for me that day recognized me immediately. "You look like a whole new person," she said. "Stronger." I nodded. I had to be. And as I stood outside the room I once lay in, I whispered, "Thank you," because that was the room where the old me died. The next day, I got another message. Daniel again. This time it was longer, almost a confession. He said he'd made mistakes, that he never meant to hurt me, that Trisha had been pressuring him, and he panicked. He asked to meet, said he just wanted to talk. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, then 20. I wasn't sure why I felt anything at all. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see the wreckage up close. So I said yes. We met in a public cafe, and when he saw me, his eyes widened. "You look different," he muttered. "Good different." I smiled politely. He didn't deserve to know how much effort that transformation took. He reached for my hand, but I didn't let him touch me. "You said you wanted to talk." I said, "So talk." He stammered through apologies, half-truths, and rewritten history, claimed he'd been confused, that his mother pressured him. I listened quietly, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to witness his discomfort. He looked at me like he was speaking to a ghost, the woman he buried too soon. He finally asked what I wanted. "Nothing," I said. "I already took it." That shook him. "What do you mean?" I leaned in. "You're losing everything, Daniel. Not because I sabotaged you, but because you built your life on lies." He blinked, face pale. "I gave you my kidney," I continued. "You gave me a lesson. I think we're even." I stood to leave, but paused. "Actually, no, you still owe me." And with that, I walked out, heels clicking like a gavel slamming down in judgment. Sophia was waiting outside the cafe with coffee in hand. "Well," she asked. I smiled. "He's more broken than I expected." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but part of me still felt unfinished. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself completely. I wanted to build something permanent, something that couldn't be taken from me, like my trust, my kidney, or my peace. So I did. Over the next few months, I opened my own firm, legally, publicly, in my real name. I gave interviews, shared my story in careful pieces, not about Daniel, but about surviving betrayal and rebuilding. I became someone other women looked up to. And as my name began trending, Daniel's disappeared from headlines. He'd become a warning. I had become the blueprint. I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference, one of the largest in the country. The topic? Turning pain into power. I didn't plan to bring up Daniel, but as I looked out at the sea of women, some with tired eyes, others with silent fire, I knew I had to go deeper. I gave a man my kidney, I said into the microphone, and he gave me a wedding announcement the next day. Audible gasps rippled through the room. I let the silence linger, but I didn't give him my power. He only borrowed it, and I took it back. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young woman approached me crying. "You're the reason I won't go back to him," she whispered. That night, I didn't sleep, not from stress, but from the overwhelming realization that my story no longer belonged to Daniel. It belonged to the women it helped. Weeks later, a reporter called. She wanted to do a profile, deep dive, interviews, photos, the whole thing. I hesitated. Did I really want my past dragged back into the spotlight? But Sophia said something that stuck. "You're not protecting your past. You're reclaiming it." So I said yes. We met in a sunlit studio where I posed not as a victim, but as a victor. The article was raw, honest, and unsparing. It detailed everything: my surgery, his betrayal, the silence afterward, the rise. But it never named Daniel. I refused. This wasn't about giving him notoriety. It was about writing him out. Still, when the article went viral, it didn't take long for people to figure it out. Former colleagues, mutual acquaintances, even Trisha's old friends shared it online. And Daniel, he sent me one last message. This one wasn't angry or arrogant, just 3 words. I lost you. I didn't respond. What was there to say? He lost me the moment he chose convenience over commitment. He lost me when he let a woman celebrate our love while I recovered alone. He lost me when he thought betrayal was forgettable. Sophia told me I'd done enough, that it was time to close the door. But something inside me whispered otherwise. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. So I decided to donate again. This time, not an organ, but a scholarship. I set it up in honor of women rebuilding after betrayal. The fund covered therapy, business training, and emergency housing. The first recipient was a mother of 2 escaping a manipulative marriage. When she hugged me, I felt a kind of healing I hadn't known I needed, giving without pain, giving with purpose. Daniel had taken something from me, but now I was giving something to the world. Eventually, Daniel showed up. In person. It was a networking event, one I didn't expect him to attend. He looked thinner, stressed, aged. His eyes searched the room until they found me. I held his gaze for a moment. He walked over slowly, like approaching a stranger. You look happy, he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was disbelief. I am, I replied. You look. I let the sentence hang. He smiled weakly. Not great. I know. He asked to sit. I nodded. We talked, not about us but about the fallout. His startup had folded. Investors pulled out. Trisha had left, taking most of what remained. I used people, he admitted, you most of all. For a second, he looked like the man I once loved, just a boy trying to be better. But the damage was done, and healing doesn't require their remorse, just your own peace. After he left the table, I sat alone, letting the quiet settle over me like dust. I didn't feel angry or triumphant, just released. That's when Sophia came over, phone in hand, beaming. You won't believe it, she said. The scholarship post went viral. Sponsors are coming forward. You might need a team. I laughed, a deep, real laugh that shook something loose inside me. Daniel was now a footnote in a chapter I'd outgrown. My story was never about him. It was about survival, reinvention, the power of choosing yourself after someone else fails to. I looked out at the crowd. So many dreamers, fighters, survivors, my people. For the first time, I wasn't pretending to be whole. I was, fully. And the woman I had become, she didn't just survive betrayal. She rewrote the ending entirely. The scholarship fund quickly became more than a donation. It became a movement. Survivors from all over began sharing their stories. Women who'd once been left behind, betrayed, discarded, now found community and courage. I read every message, every email. Some hurt more than others. One said, I was left in the hospital while he proposed to her. Another, he said I owed him for loving me at all. The pain was familiar, but no longer mine. It belonged to the woman I used to be. That version of me would have cried reading those words. But this version? She built ladders out of pain. Each story reminded me why I kept going, why I didn't just move on. I moved up, and when one woman asked if I'd ever confront him again, I replied, no, I already did. By thriving. That's the confrontation they never expect. Your quiet, radiant joy. Trisha reached out. Eventually. An email. Short. Cold. Congratulations on the fund. He wasn't worth it. Believe me. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to scream. But in the end, I simply wrote, he never was. Then I archived the thread and blocked the address. I wasn't going to spend one more second extending grace to people who never asked for it when it mattered. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant protecting myself. I'd spent too long trying to be noble, to rise above. But sometimes rising means closing the door behind you. No more glancing back, no more wondering what if. I had more important things to do now. Women to uplift, voices to amplify, a future to build. I owed the past nothing, not even a response. That silence, that was my final act of power. Months later, I was honored with a national award for social impact. The auditorium was packed. Cameras flashed. But as I walked on stage, I didn't see the lights. I saw my hospital bed, the 4 in my arm, the window I stared out of while he married someone else. I saw the moment my mother wiped my tears when I begged to know why. And then I saw the women now seated before me, waiting for my words. Thank you, I began, for believing that pain is not a destination. It's a passage. Applause erupted. I could have ended there, but I didn't. I once gave something that couldn't be returned. But what I got back, strength, purpose, and a voice that will never again be silenced. I smiled. This award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every woman who rebuilt from dust. I bowed, and I meant every word. Later that night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, award in hand. It sparkled, but not more than the look in my own eyes. For the first time, I loved who I saw, not for what she endured, but for what she chose. That was always the key. Not surviving, but choosing. Choosing to heal, to forgive, to grow, to speak, to stay silent when it protects your peace. I had spent years making other people comfortable, putting bandages over betrayal, smoothing over cruelty. But that woman, she was long gone. This woman, she owned her silence and her story. I touched the scar near my waist, the one I once hated for reminding me. Now I loved it. Proof that I gave, I lived, and I learned. Let Daniel remember me, however he wants. I've already let go, and letting go was the most radical thing I ever did. Now, my days are filled with purpose. Sophia and I run the foundation full-time. We've opened centers in 3 cities and are working on a mobile counseling van. I get letters every week, sometimes from women, sometimes from their daughters. They say, "My mother is standing again," or "She smiled for the first time in years." That's what I live for now. Not recognition, not revenge, just rebirth. I visit hospitals often, speaking to donors, comforting the scared. One afternoon, a nurse recognized me. "You were the woman in the article," she whispered, "the one whose heart broke, but kept beating." I smiled and said, "Still beating," and louder than ever. I walked down that hall, not as someone waiting for a man to love her right, but as someone who learned to love herself enough to never beg again. I may have given away a piece of my body, but I reclaimed my soul.